Do you want more speed and more power from your golf swing? Of course you do, everybody does. And that's what we're going to cover in this video by looking specifically at the hips and the two movements that they can make to help you increase your speed and add more power. So adding more speed and power to your golf swing will generally do two things. It will first of all make the game more fun, because it's generally a little bit more fun to hit the ball further. And if it's done in the right way, it'll actually make the game easier and help you shoot lower scores, because you'll simply be further down the fairway from the tee, hitting short irons into the greens, shorter putts, more birdies, lower scores. It's as simple as that. So we're going to target how you can achieve more speed and more power by looking at the hips and what they do in the golf swing and the two movements that they have, which can really help you increase the speed and add some power, as we've already said. So the lesson plan today is to first of all talk about the hip rotation and how that's really important, something we need to tap into. And then we're going to move on to something called extension and talk about what that is, how that adds power, when that should be done, and exactly how you can feel and sense this in your golf swing. So the first thing we're going to look at and how we can generate some speed in the golf swing and some power in the golf swing is through rotation. So we need to set up a little station which is going to give us some feedback as to how we're rotating in our golf swing. So what I've done is I've taken two alignment sticks. I've got one through my belt loops and I've got one positioned just here. And we'll talk a little bit more about where that's positioned in a moment. But this is going to give us some great feedback in practice for what we're doing through impact. Now, if we're trying to increase the rotational speed of the hips through impact, we really need to first of all think about what they're doing in the backswing. If I'm that golfer who tends to limit my hip rotation, there's a very, very good chance I'm not going to have great hip action in the downswing. There are examples of golfers who do this exceptionally well, but for the most part, for the majority of golfers out there who are amateur golfers, recreational golfers, what we'd first of all like you to do is make sure that in the backswing you've got a decent amount of rotation through those hips. And again, the alignment stick through my belt loops will help me see that visually. Now what I'm really trying to do is I'm trying to, as a guide, this is purely a guide, I'm trying to get around about 45 degrees of turn as a rehearsal. So as I rehearse here, I'm looking at creating a 45-degree angle in that golf club. That's our first little exercise. That's going to give us the greatest chance of, on the downswing, creating some speed in the hips. So what is this one here for? Well, as you can see, it's probably placed around about, not quite a foot, so maybe about 10 inches outside my lead foot and around about 4 inches outside my lead heel. It's going to vary a little bit for each of you, but that's a pretty good starting point. Now, if I took a starting position here and just rotated my hips, you're going to see that at some point I will make contact with this alignment stick, and that's really what I'm after. So what we're really trying to avoid here is shots where we hear that noise far too late after impact. So that would look a little bit like this. Okay, I heard that contact, but it was way, way after impact. That was a slow hip rotation, not going to be particularly good for power. So what are we looking to do here? Well, we're looking to make our nice backswing with a little bit of hip rotation. We're looking to initiate our downswing by shifting some pressure into that lead side. I really need to feel like I can sense that weighted lead side first, and then once I can feel that, I'm really trying to quite aggressively rotate my hips and get them to make contact with this alignment stick here. So let's have a go at that one and see if we can do this one a little different to that first example. So pressure is going to shift left, and then I'm going to rotate and make those alignment sticks collide. Okay, different hip action there. Got the alignment sticks to collide much earlier, and that was really the goal and the purpose of that little exercise. Now, when the alignment sticks make contact with each other, relative to when the club strikes the ball, actually isn't that important, because it's really difficult to sense that when you're hitting shots. It's difficult to know which happened first. All we're really trying to do here is create an environment, a practice station, where I'm building some good ideas and some concepts. So that idea of a nice free hip turn, some pressure shift, and then a visual of what I'm trying to do with my hips as I rotate them through is all we're really trying to create. So great little station. What that's going to do is it's going to really start to get you to rotate your hips much quicker in the downswing, which is going to cause your segments to rotate quicker, slow down quicker, and then the energy is going to get out into the golf club. So if you really want to improve your hip action in terms of rotation, create a little station like this. It's great to work on that part of your golf swing. So now let's move on to the second part of what your hips can do, which is the extension. Now this movement, which we see in almost all of the world's best golfers, is something that a lot of golfers don't appreciate is there, and I don't appreciate how much it can really give your speed a boost if you do it correctly. Hip extension is something that happens through impact into the follow through. The movement itself is this movement. So if I took my address, my hips are flexed forwards. And if we took golf out of the equation, we can flex those hips as much as we want, and we can go right down to the ground. Extension is when we make the opposite movement, so we feel like we push the hips forwards and we kind of arch backwards. Now, if we very, very simply give you a task of, if I said to you there was something on the ground that weighed a fair amount and I want you to throw that into the air as high as you can, you would use a flexion to extension as one of your power sources. You wouldn't necessarily think about it, but you would pick something up this way, you'd be in hip flexion, and then as you threw it into the air, you would extend your hips up this way, and you'd go very much into this extended position because you'd realize that that movement of the body gave you a lot of power to throw that object as high as you can. The same applies with the golf swing. Now, the good news is I don't really have to worry about the first part, because most of you are going to be starting with a good amount of hip hinge or hip flexion, which is absolutely fine. So we need to make sure that once we get to our backswing and we start down, we're maintaining that, because some of you will absolutely lose that too soon. But if we can sort of maintain that and we get into this position here, we're now at the part of the golf swing where we start to think about extension. Extension now would be where I try and take this flexed hip position as I swing through. I feel like I've moved now into this very, very different end position where my body is arched back, my belt buckle is out towards the target. This is me now in extension, but obviously what we saw there was halfway down, I was still in flexion with my hips. So a great little exercise to help you feel and sense what that's like, again, is going to involve an alignment stick. Let me set that up now. So when we do this correctly and we extend, we actually put a lot of force through the ground, and I'm sure you've heard people talk about ground force and getting your power from the ground. So the more we go from this flex position to this extended position, we're putting a lot of force upwards away from the ground. All the best players do this. So this little task here, this little exercise, is forcing you to have to make that movement. So you can see I've got an alignment stick, I've pushed it into the ground. The angle isn't that important, but what I want to make sure is that when I take an address position, the top of the alignment stick is roughly in the middle of my body, and I can just place my hands on there like I would a golf club. Now, if I had to go into my end position, there would obviously be some rotation because we want to be facing the target. But as that alignment stick is pushed into the ground, I need to apply a force to that alignment stick upwards to get it out of the ground. That force could come from my arms. And many of you will feel like when you grab that stick, you'll feel your instinctive movement to pull that out the ground would be with your arms. What we want you to do is feel like your arms don't do much. They stay connected and extended, but actually you're going to feel like you start to take your hips between flexion and you start to push them up into extension to get you to pull that alignment stick out the ground. Let me show you what that would look like. So here's my starting position, normal grip, and I'm going to rotate and extend, and there's my end position. And I really felt like I had to kind of almost squat first and then push away from the ground to get that alignment stick to come out. That's not like a golf swing. You know, we're not suggesting that this exactly, doing this drill is going to suddenly transform your game, but it's a great way to start to sense what those hips should be doing, how they need to extend, and how that applies a upward force away from the ground. And we know that all the best golfers do this. You know, the longest hitters often have both feet off the ground or 1 foot off the ground because they've used a lot of this extension up into the follow-through position. So how would you then take that through to a golf shot? Well, very, very similar to what we said in that first little exercise. We have to make sure that we have the pressure through that lead side. That's really, really important. Very difficult to do this movement if you're on this back foot. So the great little exercise here would be to preset your weight on your lead side, put the club into a little delivery position, and then the same thing is going to apply. I'm going to feel like I rotate through, but I'm also going to feel like I really push up into my follow-through position. And even though I can hit this ball and hands can stay around about shoulder height, I can still feel like I'm extended through in the follow-through. Let me show you what that would look like. Normal address, preset the weight, preset the golf club, little backswing, and then rotate and push. And again, there's my extended position. My hips now are in a very, very different position to what they were at address. Many of you, if you've ever videoed your golf swing and you see your end position, you may well see something that looks a little bit more like this. Notice I've still got some of that flex in my hips. That might mean that you're using rotation, but you're not making use of that extension. So the two things you need to look out for in your goal swing would be hips which don't look particularly open at impact, and a follow through where the chest is closer to the target than the belt buckle. If you have either of those two looks to your goal swing, there's a very, very good chance that there is distance that you're not tapping into. But the good news is those drills will help you do that. So if we can get the hips to rotate at a higher speed, and if we can get them to move from a flex position to an extended position through impact, you should be able to add a significant amount of speed and power to your game. And like we said right back at the start, that's going to make it more fun, and it's going to help you shoot lower scores. Two things that I think most people would want in their game. Thanks for watching. Usual stuff is down below. There's a comments box down there. There's a link to subscribe, and there's also a like button, so if you did like the video, give it a thumbs up. We'd also love to hear your comments on this video, and also suggestions on videos you'd like me to do going forwards. I can hopefully help you with a specific video for your needs. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here again.